Alright, good morning everybody, it's your boy Akeem and welcome to today's vlogs. I'm here to give you my grades for each team for their selections of the 2015 NFL Draft. For this vlog, I'm going to talk about the NFC West first. Now I'm going to start off things with the St. Louis Rams. They had an interesting draft and possibly the most surprising pick of the first round. Now for their needs in this year's draft, I think they should have addressed the secondary a little bit to keep that young secondary still intact, as well as address the offensive line. They needed a lot of help on the offensive side as well as a wide receiver, and they did highly effectively went after players on the offensive side to help address the offense as an entire unit. Now with their first selection at 10th overall, they went with running back Todd Gurley out of Georgia. Now that was the most surprising pick of the first round, and not only the first round of the entire draft, because I don't really think that St. Louis needed a running back with their first pick. I think they could have went with a running back in the later rounds, but I still think they should have had Trey Mason given another opportunity to be that starting nod at running back. He had a decent rookie season in my opinion, and don't forget about Stack Stacy. Now he's actually no longer with the team. He was traded with the New York Jets. But with Trey Mason, I was shocked that they didn't really give him an opportunity, and I do not really think that the Rams really needed to go after a running back with their first selection, especially when they really need a top-notch wide receiver. I think they should have went with Devontae Parker out of Louisville. Now with their second round selection, they went with a good offensive tackle out of Wisconsin and Robert Havenstein. That was not bad. In the third round, they addressed the offensive tackle again with Jamin Brown out of Louisville. Third round again, they had another pick. They went with a good backup quarterback and Sean Mannion out of Oregon State. I think he's definitely going to help fight between him and Austin Davis, who will be the backup quarterback for Nick Foles. Fourth round, they picked up another offensive tackle in Andrew Donald out of Iowa, which is not bad of a pick. And finally, in the sixth round, that's when they went with a wide receiver and Bud Sasser out of Missouri. And he had a good productive senior season, having over 1,000 yards receiving to help replace those receiving yards from Dorial Green-Beckham. He definitely stepped up his game this past season, and he does have good size at 6'2", 219 pounds. Sticking in the sixth round, they had Cody Wickman, offensive guard out of Fresno State. I'm telling you guys, they definitely went after players to help offensively. And in the seventh round, they actually had two seventh round selections, and I think these were two players that are sleepers in their positions respectively. First out of Baylor, Bryce Hager, the inside linebacker, and then with their final selection, they had Martin Ifedi, the defensive end out of Memphis. Now for Ifedi, I think this was a great selection in the seventh round because of this position, because I think he had a great junior season and he definitely had a down year as a senior, but I still think he's a pretty good pass rusher who could possibly still make the 53-man roster for the Rams. Now overall for my grade for the Rams, I actually have to give them a B-, mainly because like I said, I don't really agree with the Todd Gurley selection. I kind of think that was a wasted pick. They should have went with a wide receiver first and then address things with the offensive line to help out the team offensively, because defensively I think they have pretty much everything they need, except they possibly still need more leadership in the secondary. But I think they have a pretty good addition with Mark Barron out of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's probably why they didn't really have to go in the secondary of this year's draft. But I'm still going to give them a B-, just not agreeing with the Todd Gurley selection. Next team, my San Francisco 49ers. They had a decent draft as well. Now, particular needs that they needed headed towards this year's draft was offensive lineman, defensive lineman, linebackers, and a cornerback for this year's draft. Now, with their first selection at 17th overall, they actually traded their 13th selection to the San Diego Chargers, and they did have a great trade. They actually had picked up a 4th round and a 5th round pick just to go back 2 slots at number 17, and they still picked up Eric Armstead, the defensive tackle out of Oregon. Great tall player. I think he could be a great replacement for McDonald at the defensive tackle position. Now in the second round pick, this was a head scratcher for me. Jaquiski Tort out of Sanford. This is an excellent athlete, but I do not see our team needing a safety with this particular selection. For the past two drafts, they actually drafted a safety first with Eric Reed out of LSU and Jimmy Ward out of Northern Illinois. I was very confused with this selection. I think they should have went with an outside linebacker, a good pass rusher opposite of Aldon Smith. I do not agree with this selection. I'm thinking they could possibly probably use one of these safeties between Tart or Eric Reed to gain a little bit more bulk and become an outside linebacker, or use Tart and Reed as a safety and put Ward at the cornerback position, because Ward is smaller than the other two safeties that we had. This was a confusing pick. I think they should have went with a wide receiver with their second round selection. In third round, they picked up Eli Harrell. That was a good selection in that particular round. Outside linebacker coming out of Virginia. Actually, going with the second round pick, I don't think they should have went with a wide receiver. They should have went with an inside linebacker, and Denzel Perryman from Miami was still available for that selection. Headed into the fourth round, I think they picked up a good tight end in Blake Bell coming out of OU. 252 pounds at 6'6". I think he would be an excellent replacement and a good backup for Vernon Davis. In the fourth round, they picked up Mike Davis out of South Carolina. Now, he does have some durability issues, but I think this is a good bruising type running back, and I think with him and Carlos Hyde, they're going to be in the race of who's going to be that starting running back, as well as with the addition of Reggie Bush. Second in the fourth round, they finally went with their wide receiver and DeAndre Smelter, the wide receiver coming out of Georgia Tech. 6'2", 226 pounds, right size at that position. I understand why they picked him up, but mind you guys, they did pick up Torrey Smith from the Baltimore Ravens, and they still have Anquan Bolden. I still think with the addition of Torrey Smith, not bad. He's a good veteran, but I think they could have went with a better wide receiver in this year's draft. In the fifth round, Bradley Pinion, the punter out of Clemson, to help out the special teams. He's a good punter. Sixth and seventh round, they went with two offensive guards with Silverman out of Boston College and Trent Brown out of Florida. These two players are going to be fighting for the starting position to replace Mike Ipati, who is now with the Arizona Cardinals. And lastly, they picked up Rory Anderson, an underrated tight end coming out of South Carolina. He's a good athletic tight end, 6'5", 244 pounds. Now, overall for my grade with the Jaquisti Court, that's a big time head scratcher to me, but an interesting pick at the same time. I'm gonna actually have to give my team a solid B with their efforts for this year's draft. Next team I'm going to talk about is the Arizona Cardinals, and they did sign Mike Ipati to a 5-year, $40 million contract. Now, the Cardinals need help in the defensive line, outside linebacker, and inside linebacker, and even possibly a running back. Andre Ellington had a sophomore slump this past season. With their first selection of 24th overall, they picked up DJ Humphries, the offensive tackle out of Florida. I think this was a great addition to help address the offensive line and bring up more protection for Carson Palmer, who was having an outstanding season last season before he got hurt with the torn ligament in his knee. In the second round, they picked up an underrated defensive end out of Missouri, opposite of Shane Ray and Marcus Golden. He had 20 tackles for loss last season to go along with 10 sacks. This is a great addition to help work opposite of Calais Campbell. In the third round, that's when they went with a running back and a good player out of Northern Iowa, who I did give a scout report on, David Johnson. This is a great player, 224 pounds at 6 foot. I think he definitely has a fighting chance to become a starter, but he does have to get past Andre Ellington. In the fourth round, they picked up a decent defensive tackle out of Delaware State in Rodney Gutner, 6'5", 305 pounds. He would definitely fill in a plug in within that line of scrimmage, but hopefully he will start. He's going to have to fight for a starting position. In the fifth round, they picked up Shaq Reddick. This is a decent player, defensive end. And the next in the fifth round, they picked up J.J. Nelson, a small wide receiver coming out of UAB. He's definitely going to be helping in the special teams. And lastly, Gerald Christensen, the tight end coming out of Louisville. I think this is a great addition. He did have over 800 yards over the course of the last two seasons for the Cardinals. Now, for the Arizona, I'm gonna have to give them a solid B. A solid B, just like the San Francisco 49ers. I did like the Golston pick, the Humphreys pick, as well as David Johnson and Guntner. Those are the four picks I actually did like. Now, lastly, the Seattle Seahawks, the defending NFC champions. They actually had a I'm not really proud of their picks with this year's draft. They finally had their first selection in the second round. They traded the 31st overall to the New Orleans Saints. With their first pick in the second round, they went with Frank Clark, the defensive end out of Michigan. Not really agreeing with this selection. I think they could have picked him up in the later rounds. I think they should have went with a wide receiver with this selection. They did go wide receiver in the third round, which is a good player, and Tyler Lockett, the wide receiver out of Kansas State. I think they should have went with a bigger guy like Jalen Strong, who was still available for Arizona State. I'm very shocked that Pete Keller did not go with that Pac-12 wide receiver. In the fourth round, they picked up Terry Poole, the offensive tackle out of San Diego State, which is not bad of a pick. Sticking with the fourth round, they had another offensive lineman from West Virginia, Mark Glowinski. Not bad, not too big on that particular selection. In the fifth round, they picked up Ty Smith, the cornerback out of Towson. Now, he's definitely going to be fighting for some playing time. Richard Sherman is definitely going to be a starter. He could possibly try to make it opposite, but try to make it into the rotation and even make the 53-man roster. And with their final three selections, except for the last one, the next two in the sixth round, they picked up two defensive ends, one out of Oregon State and Obum Atron. Didn't really look too much into him. And Christian Sakali, the defensive end out of Buffalo, 290 pounds. I think he could play defensive tackle. I wasn't really pinning those two selections, but with their final selection, I think they picked up a good underrated safety out of Oregon State, Ryan Smith Murphy. He actually runs a 4.45 40, 39-inch vertically, and he is 6 foot, 214 pounds. That is definitely a great size. 8 pass breakups this past season to go along with 65 tackles. Now he has to deal with Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor. Those are the locks as starters at safety. Hopefully he can make the 53-man roster and become a backup for those guys. I think that was a decent selection with their last pick. Now, overall, I wasn't really too proud of their selections. I have to give the Seahawks a C- for their efforts in this year's draft. I wasn't too fond about their selections, especially with their first pick with Frank Clark coming out of Michigan with the off-the-field issues. I think they could have picked him up in the later rounds. So I'm going to have to give them a C-. So that wraps things up with the NFC West. The next time I'm going to catch you guys will be in just a couple of minutes where I will talk about the NFC East. Thank you for watching this vlog. I'm your man, Akeem McCall. Be easy.